Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Building Bridges community of practice lunch and learn session. This is designed to be a regular space for our community, and we look forward to bringing you many more learning sessions in the future. So if you'd like to receive updates on upcoming events and free resources, we highly encourage you to visit our community regularly, and we will have more in the future. Before we begin, I would like to respect and acknowledge the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples on whose traditional territories CU's work is conducted across Canada. We strive for respect for meaningful relationships with all Indigenous peoples as we search for collective healing, true conciliation, and honoring these beautiful lands and seas together. I also have a few quick housekeeping items to highlight before we begin. Following our speaker's presentation, we will have a dedicated Q&A session. If you would like to ask a question verbally, you can click the button raise hand on the bottom, and I will be able to unmute you on my end, and then you can turn on your microphone to speak and ask the question verbally. But if you prefer to type your questions instead of speaking, then you can use the Q&A box and put your question there. The Q&A box should show up on the bottom menu bar as well, but if you cannot find it, you can try to find the button that's a three-dot button and says more. Click that one and you should see a Q&A, another button there. So that's the way you can bring the Q&A box to the Zoom menu bar. So that's the two way we recommend you to use to ask the questions. But if none of them works for you, you can also use the regular chat box to ask the questions. But the ask verbally or use the Q&A box will help us to track the questions and make sure all of them will be answered before the session ends. You can also use the chat box, the regular one, to ask any other questions, like if you run into any technical issues or if you have a question for us as the host or any questions related to the community, feel free to drop the question in the regular chat box. And please note that this session is being recorded and will be shared on our YouTube channel and on the community platform as a public resource. Now I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Matthew Widlansky. Matthew is an associate director at University of Hawaii Sea Level Center. Matthew researches the climate and sea level variability on seasonal, interannual, and longer time scales. He uses the global climate models of the ocean and atmosphere to assess the limits of predicting coastal impacts from sea level extremes. And today he'll be sharing a session titled Building and Using the Intelligent Data Exploring Assistant. And with that, I'm pleased to turn the microphone and the screen share over to Matthew.
Thank you very much for that introduction and the opportunity to share today with this group. So I attended one of your opening webinar discussions about the Canadian AI program. I was really excited about it, so I appreciate this opportunity. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Okay. So from that introduction, you could hopefully gather that I'm a climate scientist. Is my experience. I work at the University of Hawaii Sea Level Center in Honolulu, Hawaii. And you probably wondering at this point, why am I here giving lunch and learn about a intelligent data exploring assistant, an AI assistant. Well, this is going to be a story about how our group has gotten involved working with AI, generative AI technology to assist with our work, connecting this powerful AI technology to the data that we serve to scientists around the world, sea-level data. And this opening slide, this is showing idea in action. If you were watching, that was me awkwardly typing into the prompt just to give a sense of the speed I communicate with. And as this system starts going, this is a slide from 2 months ago. I was presenting this to GFDL, and I asked it to give an introduction about the system and jump right into a data exploring exercise. So it's pulling up information about the Oceanic Nino Index, representation of El Nino, and this is Python code that the system is generating, and that's when it finishes generating that, it'll execute on our computer at the university, and then come back with results from that data analysis and an interpretation of the results. And I want to acknowledge now the lead developers on this project, Nemanja Komar and Roderick Tabala. They are the software engineers behind the IDEA project. They were able to take a concept of connecting generative AI to our database at the center and turn it into a working product. So today I'll share a little bit again about how we came about to developing this, why we are doing this, and how, if you're interested in getting involved in the project, that's available. And then I'll also talk about what we're up to these days. Things are obviously changing very quickly. So everyone has their own AI journey. It's obviously getting a lot of attention these days. I thought these two covers of from Time Magazine are illustrative of just the varying perspectives on this. On the one hand, this powerful technology that's transforming many of the ways that we do work, think about science, to also concerns about it. Rightly so, the rate of change and how it's disrupting workflows is something very much to be mindful about. And that rate of change, I think these are just AI generated drawings, but I think a way to illustrate how quickly this generative AI is advancing. This sketch of the AI and is the elephant in the room disrupting science, and we're at the point, if I kept going with this, it just becomes to the point we can't tell what's AI generated or what's not anymore. So that'll be the last of the AI generated drawings in this. And just one more perspective on the rate of change. This is from Dario, the CEO of Anthropic, and an essay he published earlier this year. And he points out that just a little over 3 years ago, AI was struggling with arithmetic. It couldn't write more than really any code worth using. And I think it's obvious today we're at a very different point with this technology. And then again, the disruptions this causes, the concerns. So I'm a research scientist sitting in a university. I'm around students who are emerging into the workforce, and there's deep concerns about the potential disruptions, just the way we think about getting work done. Me personally, as a scientist who works on data analysis problems, what's next? But then back to the potential to improve the way we do science. So this is a screenshot from a conversation that I had with ChatGPT. This is now about 6 months old, and I put a photo here just to illustrate some of the work that I was doing. So I work as a sea level scientist. One of the things I do is assist with survey work to connect the ground elevation to water levels. And what I did in this conversation is I pointed ChatGPT to a new tool that our center had just released. We call it C, the Station Explorer Assistant. And I asked ChatGPT to use our tool to relate some of that survey data I collected and produce a coastal flooding report. Now, this video that's playing, this is from snippets of what ChatGPT was doing. It went to our tool. The cursor and the text blocks that are appearing, that's ChatGPT learning to use our tool to investigate sea levels. And at the time, again, this was about 6 months ago, so it's advanced beyond this capability now. But at the time, I was awestruck that this is even possible, asking another AI system to use our AI system, produce a report, which turned out to be of the quality that would take myself several hours at least to produce. But then even beyond that, I asked it to produce a training workshop about using that tool. And that really pointed out nuances about how users could learn about using the Station Explorer Assistant and ask their own questions. I thought that was pretty neat. So I mentioned tide gauges. So the center where I work at, we operate tide gauges around the world and also work in collaboration with other tide gauge operators to assemble quality controlled data in a global database. We call it the Fast Delivery Database. One of those tide gauges is in the tropical Western Pacific in Palau. I've circled here. And this is a photo from there. This is a couple of years ago. We were leading a sea level training workshop there. And the photo, the equipment, that's a tide gauge and a GPS station. But what I want to point out, the type of questions that stakeholders often ask us relate around the theme of how do I reference the water levels from the tide gauge to high tide, or really what can the tide gauge tell me about coastal flooding? And it was also at this time when the generative AI, large language models, were just beginning to become capable of helping to answer questions like that. And this is a slide I presented at the 2024 AG Ocean Sciences, where we were demonstrating how a user's question, like about that water level reference frame, could be appended to data from our center and sent to the large language model service. So this is back using a GPT 3.5, kind of like the original ChatGPT. And the response that comes back is very nuanced and specific to that user's question and backed up by actual data from our center. So of course, we're come a long way in the past couple of years. This is, again, from a presentation I gave 2 months ago. This was idea in action at that time. And just like before, can ask it to reference water levels to different frames of reference, like high tide. And instead of just coming back with a little bit of a text response, now AI is capable of generating code, very high quality code. And again, the IDEA system takes that code and then runs it on computers that we have configured with the type of software so it's ready to go for geoscience data analysis. And here, that user prompt was asking it to make an interactive dashboard with water levels referenced to high tide. So in the rest of this presentation, I'm going to break it down into how we built IDEA, how it's being used, how if you're interested, you can get involved, and then a little bit about what we're working on these days, what's next, and I'll end with some questions that are on our mind about all of this. And I'll go through some of the examples rather quickly so that we can leave plenty of time for discussion, or if you want to try out the tools, they're live on the web, available to try out. Okay, so when did we build it? Well, I mentioned Nemo Komar, the software engineer who worked with me and was able to take these concepts of connecting LLM technology with data in a computing system. And we published on this last year in JGR. And the why that we did it is really because as powerful as this technology is productive as it can be interacting with ChatGPT or Claude or whatnot, at the time, we didn't find that those systems were really built for the purpose of supporting a geoscientist data analyzer. And our general framework for building this really comes down to how the user interacts with a LLM that's connected to data. And we quickly realized that that becomes much more productive if we also provide a computer to the large language model. We can add other components to this, instructions for how to work with the data, how to work with the computer, tools like software functions or packages, and the internet, so that makes all of this flexible. The data scope is flexible to expand to the scope of the internet, and likewise for software. And all of this has the opportunity to change in many different ways, even as fundamental as who is the user. So we built this system for humans to use, but as I showed just a few slides back, ChatGPT is fully capable now of interacting with an AI system like this. And other questions like how much computing resources to put into this. I'll talk a little bit about that, what we're working on now. And just the details of how all this is built. It's changes frequently. This slide, again, a couple months old. Most of the examples at the time were with the GPT 5.5 model. Okay, so a little bit more about data. Our primary means of serving tide gauge data out to the world is via the software framework called ERDAP, developed by NOAA. And as neat as this framework is for serving large amounts of data, it is complex to define the queries in an efficient way for people, but very easy for a modern large language model to do that. And you can ask IDEA just about ERDAP, what it's used for, and it's quite proficient at accessing data through this means. And I mentioned going through these examples rather quickly. If anything catches your eye, these QR codes go to idea conversations where you can refer to in much more detail if you'd like. Okay, so how does IDEA know about ERDEP, how to use it? Well, we configure it around this concept of assistants. Assistants are a way to provide system prompts or instructions to the large language model. And what that means in practice is these days just providing a little bit of information, critical information, where to go for the data, briefly what's in the data, what are the variable names, what is the structure of it. And that's all that's really needed because, again, the large language models are already proficient coders. So they can take just a small paragraph of information and really run with it. And with that information and the computer that we provide to it is able to assist with performing real work, real data analysis activity. And that computer system, we've primarily structured it around a Python kernel. So a way for the AI system to work with Python in some ways analogous to the way human scientists work with it. Writing code, the code executes in real time, then the AI can refer back to that, ask questions about variables that are already defined, already in memory, and continue on. And that avoids having to send large amounts of data context back and forth to the AI system. I mentioned tools a little bit. One such tool is called Paper QA2 from Future House. At least last year, this was state of the art for literature review. To be able to ask questions about journal articles, even about the figures within journal articles. So if you're interested in this type of thing, I encourage checking it out. It's from Future House, and it's just one of the tools that we build into IDEA. And what that allows is as I mentioned, asking really nuanced questions about figures within journal articles. And this is just an example of the user asking about the IDEA article itself. And on the right is what came back from the system. So all of what we develop is research supported primarily by NOAA and made available open source from the UHC Center GitHub, and it's under /IDEA. There at that page, if you check it out, a lot of different branches. So I'll get to what we're working on these days, but if you're interested in this or changing it, developing it locally, whatnot, there's quick starts where you can get going right away in a Dockerized environment on your personal computer, or if you're interested in this type of concept of connecting it, if you work at a data center, I'm interested in discussing more about that if you have questions. And as I mentioned, this tool IDEA is available online to check out. IDEA is behind a login. I'll get to why that is in a second, but there is a public access guest account where you can just click and go and start testing it out. And to contrast that with the Station Explorer Assistant, or C, that I showed ChatGPT using a little while back, that's a no login required. sea level only data assistant. So that was, and C was developed to show as a proof of concept what happens if you take a data center archive like at the UHSLC Center and connect that with this AI framework. Okay, so just a little bit about the look of IDEA. Of course, it's a chat-based interface where users can create their own assistants, upload literature review with conversation history, and of course, the disclaimer, which was very critical early on when we were developing this, that it did make mistakes with quite some frequency. Those mistakes are becoming less frequent now, but that raises even more concern, the need to carefully check results. If you log into the platform, this is what managing an assistant looks like. So you can start from something simple as just the welcome assistant, how to ask it questions, how to use IDEA, check out the Station Explorer assistant, or start building your own. A library to upload literature, and a conversation history. This is just one example about an example conversation if you're interested. Okay, so, and I showed earlier a video of conversation, but this is just kind of how it looks. User prompting, the AI generates code. That code comes to our computer at the university where it executes, and then the output sent back to the AI. If there are errors in the code, the AI sees the error messages, fix it, iterate through, and provide back through the user interface output from the code, whether that be plots, data, interpretation of the results. And just a little bit about the user feedback, but want to get to having some discussion in a moment, but just real briefly, the feedback has ranged widely from I love IDEA to it's just a blank screen. I don't know what I should ask it. And that's maybe not to be not unexpected, especially as quickly as all of this has changed. And just another comment that has been coming in a lot is now that AI is generating a lot, capable of generating a lot of code, thousands of lines of code, if not more than that, how much should we expect the human user to be reviewing that code as it comes in? And that's a question on our mind these days. And then this last one, more so than ever, is IDEA necessary now that there are increasingly other types of assistants that are very efficient in helping data scientists get work done. I can share a few thoughts on that, where we're at currently on that question. And with all this, we're constantly collecting feedback and iterating on these processes. A little bit about the usage. So we're a small group. We're on the order of about 250 million tokens per month going back and forth through the system. That comes out to a cost on between 500 and 1,000 US dollars per month. This is supported primarily by National Science Foundation through the NEAR pilot program. And these dollar amounts, these are in US dollars. It gives you a scope on the size of the project. So this is a very modest scope project. We got started with a $5,000 grant of OpenAI credits, and that was more than enough for the research development and the first year of user engagement. And we recently got a supplement to that for CloudBank resources. This is a resource to connect academic researchers with Microsoft inference capability. So we're excited about that. It's plenty to keep us going in a research small group framework. And so that brings me then to the question, what's needed to make IDEA more useful and reliable? So now that we're at a point where there's Claude Code or Codex or whatnot, where do we want to go with this? Well, our small team, we're focused around continuing to make interfaces that are really helpful for human scientists to help get work done. And that means things like thinking about how to connect this with high-performance computing. I mentioned about this supervising the workflow. So now that AI is writing thousands of lines of code in just seconds, how do we supervise that? How do we check it for errors? These are the types of things we're researching these days. And then the training and evaluation. So really like this lunch and learn, something new to me, but we're hoping to get more involved on the training and evaluating human perspectives on using these interfaces. Just briefly, a couple research priorities for this year. Skills, AI skills. So these are primarily markdown-based instruction that's hierarchical, so we don't have to overload the AI with all of the instructions at the beginning. We can develop individual skill packages that we're active working on that. This is one example where an idea conversation about creating a skill and then using it to access data that otherwise it wasn't instructed about how to acquire. And the second and last one that I'll mention today, building a more agentic workflow. So instead of the user just asking one AI to go out and do work, our thinking is it does take a more of a graph network of AI systems, whether that may be a planner agent that can task out to multiple other agents to work on specific actions and then report back. And the last thing on what we're working on next, this is the user interface of IDEA is about to change completely. We're switching over to building IDEA off of the Open Web UI framework. It's an open source platform to build a ChatGPT-like user interface, but with full customization. So we're, as a team, excited about this because what it's providing us the opportunity to use a state-of-the-art user interface where we can focus on advancing ideas, the agentic system that works behind this, and it's and then connected into the user interface. And this is just a screenshot. We're soon to release this. It'll release at ideaaxiom.org is a similar free login based system with, again, all of the code that we develop open source and available on GitHub. So to wrap on the questions that are somewhat uncomfortable, but I think becoming more and more important to ask. The first one, how should AI work be acknowledged? And this was something I hadn't really thought about too much until we saw it coming up in the logs. Users are asking IDEA to assist them with writing science manuscripts. And this was actually a response that IDEA sent back to one of the users. And it was IDEA asking the user to remove IDEA from the authorship. And how the answer to this question is going to change in the future is something I'm very curious about. The next one, I mentioned about the responsibilities of reviewing the output. These days, that's still possible, although becoming more and more difficult is the amount of context from the AI system comes back at a rate that very likely could exceed our ability to review it in a practical sense, let alone if the response from the AI comes back in a language or a style that we're not capable of reviewing carefully. I mentioned uncomfortable questions. Personally, the ability to get work done now with AI assistance capability, it is exciting, probably transformative, but yet there does seem to be, at least again personally, this sense of this what's been referred to by Harvard Business Review as AI brain fry, or just that overwhelming that mental overload, and then the productivity paradox. Just okay, we can rapidly get all of this work done, but are we actually being more productive? Again, uncomfortable questions. And just the last of these four, and it's just about the rate of change with all this. So we published on IDEA last year. What we published is now honestly completely obsolete. We're completely rebuilding the system every few months. I mentioned we're about to release a whole new user interface at ideaaxiom.org, and it just gets the rate of change. And one thing that really strikes me is the speed that AI is able to provide intelligence. And I opened this presentation with me awkwardly typing into a chatbot prompt. The speed that I type in a written sense pales in comparison to how AI infers intelligence. And that brings to the question about the future of scientific work. We ended our paper with a sentence that brought us concern enough to put it in the paper, and it was that we acknowledge the potential for AI tools to take over aspects of our own work. It already has. And at the time, we really put a lot of thought whether we should include that or not. But it was our realizations we were working on this paper on demonstrating the ability of AI to do the types of work that we were previously doing ourselves at the UHSLC Center. And over the past year, I think this has become more and more of a mainstream concern. This, again, from the essay, The Adolescence of Technology, about just the potential for what's next with AI transforming work. So this is the last slide, and I want to then open up for discussion or trying out the tools. And as I mentioned, it's everything is on the web. It's the software is open source on GitHub, and you can access the web apps via this QR code and ask the questions that interest you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. This is a really insightful presentation, and obviously you added many more detailed and information into this presentation. So I learned a lot. Thank you so much. I do have a question for you. Do you have any plan to commercialize the tool, or it's mostly that this will be something you try to support other academic or the non-for-profit organizations to develop their own tool or yeah.
Yeah, so a good question. We're an academic research group, and that's always going to be the primary focus. So any of the research and development work will continue to be open source, and it has to be. It's publicly supported. So that's the design in our personal interests. We're academic researchers. We are forming ideaaxiom.org is a potential to support commercial interests, in the sense that what we've realized is there can be a disconnect between the technology that is open source and available to be used, but then how to start using it. And that's why we're forming ideaaxiom.org, is an opportunity to provide that service if there is interest. On the other hand, there may not be interest in that, and users may just want the source code to build on their own, and that's fine too. If this wasn't clear, we're obviously very much in the science. I'm a climate scientist. That's our focus. It's not like trying to start up a business to do this. And the other thing too, at any point, Claude Code or Codex could do all of this. It's just, at least right now, we don't find those interfaces. Well, we use them every day. We use them to build this type of technology. We don't find them fully supporting that data analysis workflow, interacting with data, seeing the plots come up on the screen, asking questions, getting that type of science done. Well, I see a question that came in the Q&A, and this is about API access beyond the user interface. Probably. We've thought about this a bit, in the sense that at least as of a couple of months ago, when we were completely building our own user interface, and we're thinking, oh, gee, like there's so many other interfaces. People may have their own preferences, and really, again, our interest is building behind the scenes. How do we develop a really useful agentic system with a comprehensive skills library? So how to make that available to users the way they want to use it. This person is asking about API access. It's something on our minds. If that's particularly of interest to you, I encourage you to get in touch with us, either through our website or from GitHub. And just one other thought about that too is our work with the skills library. One of the neat things about AI skills is open protocol. I believe Anthropic was the original developer on it. Skills can be used by anything. Once they're configured, they follow that protocol. Most of the state-of-the-art large language models are post-trained around working well with that skills protocol. So as we develop skills, they can be used by any system. I see another question in the chat. Do we plan to build an MCP server? Short answer is no. But longer answer is, if it's shown that it would be useful, we would. And where I'm reluctant about going into the MCP server route, well, it potentially could help streamline some of the data flow for the types of data that we're focused on building these systems for. They work very well using a skill-based technique to go out and work with the data services that already exist. And that means something like, here's the ERDAP server for accessing oceanographic data. Here's a paragraph about how it's constructed. Please go access it. There are obviously many use cases for the MCP server, but we just haven't really found where spinning one up ourselves would help with this type of workflow. On the other hand, we often find it useful to point idea to MCP servers. So, and if the person who asked that question has other thoughts, I encourage the discussion. We can work by email or whatnot about that. And okay, I see the question now. Let me read it out. How do we address the issue of the agent's response cost and the consistency of responses in long conversations? Okay, so it's actually two really good questions. I'll try to answer this briefly. The first one about the cost. So because we're a small research group, I mentioned about the costs are covered by through National Science Foundation support, and this is on the order of $5,000 to $10,000 US dollars per year. It gives a scope of what it costs to have a research program like this with public tools for researchers. The second question about the consistency of the response in long conversations. So this is something that's obviously changing rapidly. So what was considered a long conversation 2 years ago is considered a micro conversation today. And we can infer a little bit of how this is going to look next year or whatnot. But today, a long conversation is about 1 million tokens, or 500 to 750 million words. But you could think, oh, that 1 million words, that's a lot. But we have to remember the way these systems are built. Every turn, all of the context is being sent back to the LLM to read, respond back. And the quality of the response does degrade over the course of the conversation. What that means in practice now is users can almost get to the equivalent of a rough draft science manuscript through IDEA. And then if they kept going in that one conversation, the quality would get worse and worse until it would just stop working. That's what the restart button is for, just to switch over. But that's not ideal in any sense. So we're working towards developing next generation approaches to this, where how do you continue a conversation from where you were before without losing that quality? That's I don't think anyone has solved that yet, but it's obviously important. Thank you for those questions.
So thank you so much, Matthew, for answering all these questions. And I think it's time to wrap up for the session. So thank you, everyone, for your wonderful questions and active participation today. I just wanted to share a quick reminder to stay connected through our upcoming community events. They are completely free, and now we have our ongoing AI clinic where we have two experts to answer questions related to their data management background and expertise. Also, we have a meetup event. The two AI clinic experts will help to host, which is using AI coding agent to explore ocean data. That one will be a hands-on session that everybody gonna have the chance to try this AI coding agent, and we will provide a free token for you to explore. I'll drop the links here so you can take a look and register if you're interested in this. Then finally, we would like to extend our thanks to our Building Bridges partners and our funders, including Canada's Ocean Supercluster, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and Meopar for making these collaborative community space possible and all these events. Thank you again. Thank you, Matthew, and have a wonderful afternoon and maybe evening for people who are in the Eastern Coast. So yeah, we're looking forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.